He was taking his mistress on a luxury trip, but his wife showed up with the triplets at the boarding gate. What she did next, no one ever forgot. The air at Los Angeles International Airport was a cocktail of jet fuel, overpriced lattes, and the buzz of countless lives in transit. For Peter Hamilton, it was the stage for a new chapter. He felt the eyes on him but didn't care. He relished them. Beside him, Olivia Bennett didn't walk. She glided through the terminal. Each step was a performance of confidence, the kind that had made her a social media sensation with millions of followers. Peter carried her bag, a sleek Louis Vuitton worth more than a used sedan, with the ease of someone holding their car keys. It was a deliberate act, a public display of devotion. He looked at her not with love, but as a collector admiring his most prized acquisition. Phones turned their way. A small crowd of Olivia's fans, materializing from the chaos, was already recording, faces glowing from their screens, whispering to each other, "That's him! Her new guy!" The mystery of the man who'd won the influencer's heart was about to be solved, and the internet was hungry for it. Olivia flashed a practiced smile at the cameras, effortless and effective. She brushed Peter's arm, a subtle claim of ownership. To her, he was the ultimate validation. Older, reserved, and filthy rich. The kind of man who didn't need her fame but craved it. It was the perfect storyline for her next career phase. They approached the first-class boarding gate, a gateway to a world of champagne and lie-flat seats, when the crowd parted like a reluctant tide. In the space that opened stood a woman. She lacked Olivia's polish. Her clothes were simple, a faded pair of jeans and a cotton tee that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands escaping across a weary face. But it wasn't her plainness that stopped time in the terminal. It was what she carried. In her arms was a child. Clinging to her legs, one on each side, were two more, small, identical faces, with wide, nervous eyes, taking in the noisy world. Peter froze. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxen mask. The designer bag in his hand suddenly felt absurdly heavy. He knew this woman. He knew those children. Sarah Hamilton, his wife, stepped forward. The airport's din faded to a distant hum. Phones that had been trained on Olivia's fairy tale romance now swiveled, like vultures spotting fresh prey, to the real drama unfolding. Olivia glanced from Peter to Sarah, then to the kids. Confusion clouded her face. Children? Who were these children? She looked to Peter for a denial, an explanation, anything to restore her curated reality. But Peter was silent, paralyzed. Sarah didn't scream or make a scene. Her voice, when it came, was low but sliced through the air with surgical precision. She locked eyes with her husband, ignoring the woman beside him, ignoring the cameras, channeling years of pain and anger into one sentence. "Is this why you never acknowledge your kids in public?" The question hung, brutal and undeniable. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Each word hammered a nail into the coffin of Peter Hamilton's public image. The devoted partner, the successful entrepreneur, the doting lover. All of it crumbled in that moment. The clicks of phones became a grim symphony. Olivia's fans, who moments ago filmed a love story, now captured a family's collapse in high definition. They didn't know it, but they were live-streaming the moment that would change everyone involved forever. The image of Peter, pale beside his stunning mistress, with his forgotten wife and 3 hidden children before him, wasn't just gossip. It was a hook, and America was about to be reeled in. The silence after Sarah's question was louder than any jet engine. It lasted a second, maybe 2, but in that void, entire worlds shattered. Olivia Bennett's broke first. Sarah's words weren't just an accusation. They were a mirror reflecting a grotesque truth she couldn't process. Children. The word ricocheted in her mind, meaningless. Peter, the man who took her to exclusive rooftop bars where they whispered secrets, who bought her jewelry in New York with promises of a shared future, who made her believe she was his everything, had children, 3 of them, and a wife. Shock gave way to nausea. The terminal air, once ripe with possibility, now felt toxic, choking. The stares that once adored her now dissected her, judged her. She was no longer the muse, the conqueror. In a heartbeat, She'd been demoted to the oldest, most humiliating role. The other woman, the mistress, the fool. Her survival instinct, honed by years navigating the treacherous waters of online fame, screamed one command: run. Without thinking, without looking at Peter, whose frozen face confirmed everything, she turned. Her movement was sharp, clumsy, the opposite of her usual grace. She pushed through the crowd, bumping shoulders, fleeing the mob forming around her. The sound of phone clicks hounded her like a pack of dogs. She spotted the women's restroom sign like a castaway seeing land. She shoved the door open and locked herself in the first stall, her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape. The smell of bleach and the hum of ventilation were a sensory lifeline, a cocoon against the chaos outside. She leaned against the cold partition, legs shaking so badly she had to sit on the toilet lid. In the sterile solitude of the airport bathroom, reality hit like a punch. The puzzle pieces, once blurred by convenient passion, snapped into place, forming a hideous picture. The calls Peter never took at certain hours. The weekend getaways cancelled at the last minute for business emergencies. His refusal to be photographed with her at family-friendly events, always opting for discreet venues far from LA's elite circles. He wasn't protecting his privacy. He was hiding his other life. Memories, once sweet, now tasted like poison. The diamond bracelet he gave her for her birthday. For the only star in my life, he'd said. What a lie. The penthouse he leased for her in West Hollywood. Not a love nest, but a gilded cage to keep her tucked away and accessible. Every gift, every promise, every word of love was a prop in an elaborate puppet show, and she'd been the star marionette, dancing happily while he pulled the strings. Shame burned through her, hotter and more painful than any humiliation she'd ever felt. She, Olivia Bennett, the woman who set trends, who taught others about confidence, had been duped in the most basic way. She wasn't special. She was a cliché. Worse, she'd unknowingly become complicit in another woman's pain. The image of Sarah, with her wounded dignity and 3 small children, haunted her. That woman wasn't a stranger. She was the real victim of the same lie Olivia had starred in. Her phone's relentless buzzing in her bag yanked her back to reality. Notifications, Instagram, TikTok, gossip sites. She didn't need to look to know what was happening. The video was already viral. Headlines were being written. Influencer's affair exposed at LAX. Her career, built on a foundation of authenticity and female empowerment, was crumbling in real time. The brands that sponsored her, the followers who worshipped her, it would all collapse. Cancellation wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. A dry sob escaped her throat. No tears, just a cold void in her chest. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't go back to the penthouse he paid for. She couldn't face anyone. There was only one option: disappear, vanish from LA, erase her tracks before the avalanche of hate and judgment buried her. She needed to flee, not from Peter or Sarah, but from herself, from the naive woman she'd allowed herself to become. While Olivia hid, Sarah moved. After the mistress's flight, Peter's focus shifted to his wife, a flicker of anger in his eyes, the rage of a man caught, stripped of control. But before he could form a word, a command, a threat, Sarah did something he didn't expect. She turned her back on him. With a calm that seemed to come from some deep, unshakable place, she knelt, adjusted the child in her arms, and took the hands of the other 2. "Come on, my loves," she said, her voice soft, a balm amid the chaos. She didn't look back. She gave him no satisfaction of a fight, no fuel for another scene. Her retreat was quiet, dignified, and utterly devastating. She walked away from him, from the boarding gate, from the life he'd tried to force on her, each step a declaration of independence. The crowd parted for her with newfound respect. People who'd been filming lowered their phones, faces marked with pity and admiration. Sarah was no longer just a betrayed wife. She was a symbol. She crossed the terminal, her 3 children, her tiny honor guard, and vanished toward the exit, leaving behind a powerful man reduced to a statue of shame and a designer bag forgotten on the floor. She didn't head to the sprawling mansion in Bel Air that Peter called home, and she'd come to see as a gilded prison. Instead, a nondescript car, no chauffeur in sight, waited at the curb outside arrivals, away from the taxis and ride-shares. Behind the wheel was Rachel Carter, a woman with a sharp gaze and tailored suits, known as LA's fiercest family law attorney with an unofficial specialty in toppling powerful men. Rachel said nothing as Sarah and the kids climbed in. She handed her a water bottle and waited as Sarah settled the children who, exhausted by a tension they couldn't grasp, fell asleep almost instantly in the back seat. The car pulled away in silence, heading not toward the city's affluent enclaves but to the quiet hills of Ojai. Their destination was a modest house, a hidden retreat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by wildflowers and the hum of cicadas. It was the perfect sanctuary. Inside, with the scent of cedar and earth filling the air, Sarah finally broke. The adrenaline that had carried her through the airport dissolved, and the weight of years of pain and humiliation crashed down. Tears she'd refused to shed in public now flowed freely, silent and searing. Rachel brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. She knew silence, in that moment, was the deepest form of respect. When the first wave of sobs subsided, Sarah began to speak. Her words poured out like a flood, breaking through the dam of fear and shame Peter had built around her. She told everything, not the polished story LA's elite knew of the reclusive wife of a tycoon, but the raw, ugly truth. She described meeting Peter, how he'd swept her off her feet with overwhelming attention, making her feel like the most important woman alive. She spoke of their whirlwind marriage, promises of a shared life that never materialized. Then came the pregnancy. Her joy, his shock. When the ultrasound revealed not one but 3 heartbeats, Peter's mask began to slip. Triplets didn't fit his image as a freewheeling mogul. They were a complication, a mess. The emotional manipulation escalated. He convinced her to cut off friends and family, claiming they were jealous, that they didn't want the couple's happiness. He isolated her, turning the mansion into his domain, where he set the rules. The birth was premature, a nightmare of incubators and beeping monitors. Peter didn't show up at the hospital. He cited an urgent meeting in Dubai, a lie she was too fragile and terrified to challenge. She went through it alone, staring at her 3 tiny, fragile babies, silently vowing to be strong for them. The financial abuse followed, subtle and vicious. Though surrounded by luxury, she had no access to money. She received an allowance, a sum he controlled, forcing her to beg for anything extra. He made her feel incompetent, like a child incapable of handling finances, while he spent millions on cars, watches, and, as she now knew, mistresses. "He told me I was lucky," Sarah whispered to Rachel, her voice hoarse with pain. "Lucky he didn't abandon me with 3 kids. He said no woman in my condition, with this baggage, would be wanted. And the worst part, I almost believed him." Rachel listened, her face unreadable but her eyes cataloguing every detail, every piece of evidence of neglect, psychological abuse, and abandonment. She wasn't just hearing a client's story. She was building the case that would dismantle Peter Hamilton's empire. While Sarah found her voice in a hidden retreat, the digital world erupted. The airport video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was on every phone in America. News outlets once cautious about Peter now had no restraints. Headlines were merciless. Tycoon caught with mistress as wife confronts him with hidden triplets at LAX. The narrative split into 3 threads, each with its own star. Peter, the villain. His PR team, caught off guard, issued a weak statement about a misunderstanding and begged for family privacy, the same family he'd publicly denied. The attempt at damage control flopped. The internet tore him apart, digging up old stories, connecting dots, painting a portrait of a ruthless narcissist. Olivia, the mistress, became the target of a brutal cancellation. She was judged, convicted, and sentenced in the court of public opinion in record time. Homewrecker, gold digger, complicit, her guilt or ignorance didn't matter. In the internet story, she was the secondary villain. Brands, fearing backlash, moved fast. The first contract termination email arrived before sundown. It was the first of many. Her career, built on the shaky ground of public perception, was collapsing. And then there was Sarah. In her silence, she became a phenomenon. Her image, standing tall, dignified with her 3 children, became a banner. She didn't need to say another word. Her presence, her courage to show up, spoke volumes. Moms groups, women's organizations, everyday people, they saw her as a symbol of resilience, the embodiment of a woman refusing to be erased. Support for her was overwhelming, unconditional. In the Ojai house, far from the storm, Sarah looked at Rachel, her eyes red, but her resolve shining like steel. "I want him to never use my kids to promote himself or control me again. I want them safe. And I want him to pay for every day he made me feel invisible." Rachel gave a faint smile, her first that day. "He won't pay, Sarah. He'll invest. He'll pour every cent of the wealth that should be yours and your kids into salvaging his image. And that's where we'll get him. The war won't be in the media. It'll be in the only place he truly fears, the courtroom, and we're already winning." The cancellation of Olivia Bennett wasn't a wave. It was a tsunami. In her temporary hideout, a rented studio booked under a fake name, she watched her life unravel through the cracked screen of her phone. Each notification was a blow. Brands issued statements severing ties, citing brand alignment and core values, but the message was clear. She was poison. Her followers, once showering her with praise, now flooded her comments with snake emojis and venomous accusations. She'd become a digital pariah. The silence of her apartment was broken only by the hum of the fridge and the echo of voices condemning her in her mind. Loneliness was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. Money, once seemingly endless, was drying up. Without contracts, bills piled up. Peter, the architect of her ruin, kept calling. Dozens of times. His calls were like knocks on a haunted house door, and she ignored them with growing terror. She knew what he'd say. He'd lie, blame her, maybe even try to lure her back with empty promises. She didn't have the strength to hear his voice, but there was someone else she couldn't stop thinking about, Sarah. The image of that woman, standing strong at the airport with a strength Olivia never had, was seared into her mind. She wasn't the enemy. Olivia saw it now with painful clarity. They were both victims of the same man, just at different stages of the same tragic play. Driven by a mix of desperation, guilt, and a strange need for connection, Olivia made a decision. She had to talk to her. Getting Sarah's contact was a hurdle. Olivia used the last of her influence, calling in a favor from a gossip columnist who owed her one, promising an exclusive she'd never deliver. The columnist, sensing a bigger story, got Rachel Carter's number. Olivia sent a single, humble text. "This is Olivia Bennett. I need to talk to Sarah. Please. I didn't know anything." The reply took hours. Hours Olivia spent pacing the tiny studio, biting her nails until they bled. Finally, a message came. Not from Rachel, but an unknown number. It was an address, a discreet loft in Silver Lake, and a time. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone. The next day, Olivia barely recognized herself in the mirror. Pale, with deep shadows under her eyes, she wore plain clothes she hadn't touched in years. The influencer armor was gone, revealing the vulnerable woman beneath. She arrived at the loft on time, heart pounding. The door opened before she could knock. Sarah was there. Alone. The space was neutral, impersonal, a safe ground for an impossible meeting. For a moment, the women just looked at each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Olivia broke the silence, her voice a fragile whisper. Was it all a lie? The question was about Peter, their relationship, the life she thought she was building. But it was also about herself, her identity, her worth, all wrapped in those 3 words. Sarah studied her with a serenity that was almost unnerving. There was no anger in her eyes, no triumph, just an old, weary sadness. "You're not my enemy," Sarah said, her voice calm and steady. "You're just the next version of me. He used me, filled me with promises, then discarded me, when I was already in love and pregnant. He humiliated me, threatened me, told me I was nothing without him. I felt like garbage. But at the start it was all beautiful. He seemed perfect. Each word mirrored Olivia's own experience, the love bombing, the subtle isolation, the feeling of being someone's entire world. She was only at the beginning of the cycle Sarah had already endured. "He'll call you," Sarah continued, as if reading her mind. "He will. He can't stand losing control. He'll promise you everything, say he's left me, that he wants you. He'll make you feel guilty for not answering." She paused, her gaze sharpening. "Don't pick up, or you'll fall into the same cycle I did and get burned, and this time his fall will take you down with him." The warning was both a verdict and a lifeline. Olivia shivered. The truth was uglier than she'd imagined. She wasn't just a deceived mistress, she was next in line for destruction. Devastated, she nodded her thanks and left, the weight of the world on her shoulders. That night she tried posting an apology on her socials, a bid to share her truth. It was futile. The hate only grew. She was a pawn in someone else's game, and no one cared about her side. While Olivia drowned in her personal hell, Sarah's war entered a new phase. With Rachel's meticulously gathered evidence, bank statements proving financial abuse, testimonies from mansion staff about Peter's absence, medical records confirming he wasn't there for the triplets' birth, they filed a devastating lawsuit in LA's courts. They didn't just seek divorce. They demanded sole custody of the triplets and control of the wealth legally owed to the children, a multi-million-dollar trust Peter treated as his personal piggy bank. The petition was a legal masterpiece, detailing years of parental neglect, psychological abuse, and emotional abandonment. Peter's legal team scrambled. They claimed he was a present father, just private, that his trips were necessary to maintain the family's lavish lifestyle, that Sarah was emotionally unstable, but their arguments were flimsy against the mountain of evidence and, crucially, public opinion. The case wasn't just a family dispute. It was a national spectacle. The media tracked every move, every hearing. Sarah's airport image became the case's emblem. The judge, seasoned and aware of the case's spotlight, moved with unusual speed. He reviewed the evidence, heard the defense's weak claims, and ruled decisively. Sarah got full custody. In a crushing blow, the judge stripped Peter of control over the children's trust, transferring it to Sarah under court oversight. The fortune he'd used to fuel his excesses and control his wife was suddenly out of reach. He was granted supervised visitation, always in Sarah's presence, a legal formality everyone knew was a humiliation. He'd never visit. It would mean admitting defeat. Justice, fueled by exposed truth, was swift and precise. For Peter Hamilton, the man who thought himself untouchable, it was the beginning of the end. The Bel Air mansion, once the heart of Peter Hamilton's power, became his tomb. The silence within its walls was no longer the controlled calm of a man who dictated his world's rhythm. It was the silence of absence, of defeat. Staff, now paid from an account he didn't control, moved like ghosts, their tasks mechanical, their eyes averted. He was a dethroned king in his own palace. Alone in the home theater with its massive screen and imported leather recliners, Peter didn't watch movies. He watched his downfall on repeat. The leaked footage of the final hearing, likely slipped to the press by Rachel's team, he thought bitterly, was his daily torment. He saw himself at the defense table, his arrogance dissolving with every word from the judge. But the image that haunted him, that made him rewind again and again, was Sarah's. She stood before the judge, composed, tearless. Then she said the line that sealed his social and emotional ruin. He never held the kids, not in the hospital, not at home. He never truly wanted them. The simplicity of the statement, its factual weight, was annihilating. It wasn't a crime, but a fundamental human failure. And as he watched for the 100th time, Peter felt something new, not anger or humiliation, but an echo. A cold void in his chest, where a feeling he'd never nurtured should have grown. For the first time, the weight of not being a father, of actively rejecting that part of himself, began to surface. Not as regret for the pain he'd caused, but as the realization of an irreparable loss to himself. He'd severed a piece of his own story, and now he felt the phantom pain. His name, once synonymous with success, was now a punchline, a scandal. His businesses, tied to his personal brand, began to falter. Longtime partners distanced themselves, citing market volatility. Friends who once vied for invites to his galas stopped returning calls. The isolation was total. On sleepless nights, driven by a desperation he wouldn't name, he scrolled his contacts. The list, once a weapon of influence and pleasure, was now a graveyard. He called the women who'd always been available, models, actresses, socialites who orbited his power. The calls went to voicemail. Text stayed on single grey ticks, blocked. He was radioactive. And then there was Olivia. He tried everything. Different numbers, emails, bouquets with pleading notes, full of the same lies about love and longing that always worked. But she didn't respond. Her silence was the final proof that his manipulative power was gone. He didn't love her, never had, but he wanted her forgiveness, her submission, just to prove he could still control someone. Her silence was the loudest answer. He couldn't. For Olivia, silence was a different beast. It was a desert she had to cross. With no money, no contracts, no purpose, she hit rock bottom. The studio was days from eviction, food was running out, the darkness in her mind was as thick as the darkness outside her window. One bleak night, the thought of ending it wasn't fleeting. It was a real seductive escape from unbearable pain. Then an envelope slid under her door. No sender, no stamp, just a card with an address and a time. It was a women's shelter in a working-class LA neighborhood she'd never heard of. Her first instinct was fear, a trap, maybe the press. But desperation outweighed fear. She had nothing left to lose. At the shelter, an old renovated house, she wasn't met with cameras or questions, but with a hug. An older woman with a kind face welcomed her inside. In a circle of chairs sat other women, different ages, different backgrounds, survivors of abusive relationships, loss, humiliation. They didn't judge her. They listened. For the first time in months, Olivia shared her story and was truly heard. She got help, a place to stay, food, therapy. She never knew who sent the note, but a suspicion grew, too improbable to be anything but true. Days later, confirmation came. An anonymous donation enough to keep the shelter running another year. The director, sharing the news, mentioned a message from the donor. Tell the new guest every woman deserves a second chance. The destruction she nearly faced doesn't have to be the end. I've been there and this place saved me. Now it'll save her. It had to be Sarah. The woman Olivia had unknowingly helped humiliate was now pulling her from the ashes. Sarah, who knew the anatomy of narcissistic destruction, understood the abyss Olivia was teetering over. She'd extended a hand, not out of pity, but from a sisterhood forged in fire. In a session with the shelter's therapist, a wise woman, Olivia grasped the message behind the rescue. Sarah hadn't saved her to hide forever. She'd given her a choice. The therapist put it plainly. You can disappear or beg for scraps forever, or you can use this pain, this vulnerability. You were a victim, but you survived. Show that. Your story isn't shame, it's survival. That's something no brand can buy and no cancellation can take. The idea was terrifying and liberating. The months after the legal storm were a quiet, profound rebuilding. Sarah, with her children's future in her hands, did what she wanted most. She vanished. She sold the Bel Air mansion, a symbolic cleansing, and moved with the Triplets to a farmhouse in rural Vermont, a place where the air was crisp, the horizon vast, and the loudest sound was her kids' laughter on the lawn. Far from the media, L.A. and Peter, she rediscovered herself. Not as a tycoon's wife or a scandal's victim, but as Sarah, as a mother. Life was simple, filled with routines once denied her, driving the kids to the local school, shopping at the farmer's market, spending afternoons reading on the porch while they napped. She found a peace Peter's money could never buy, a peace from within. Olivia chose the opposite path. Instead of vanishing, she re-emerged. But it was a new Olivia. She reactivated her socials, but the filters, poses, and luxury were gone. Her first post was a raw video, shot on her phone, no makeup, hair loose. She didn't apologize, she told her story. With brutal honesty, she spoke of seduction, manipulation, the blindness of passion, and the pain of humiliation. She shared the cancellation, the loneliness, the despair, and the moment she nearly gave up. She didn't paint herself as a saint, but as a woman who erred unknowingly, was deceived, and was trying to rise. She showed vulnerability, not as weakness but as her new strength. The response was mixed at first, but something shifted. Her story resonated. Women shared their own experiences in the comments, forming an unexpected community. They no longer saw the mistress but one of their own. Olivia stopped selling products and started sharing processes, therapy, self-worth, spotting toxic relationship signs. Her audience changed. Millions of shallow followers gave way to hundreds of thousands of engaged women who didn't want fashion tips, but survival strategies. She became a voice, not an image. A year after the scandal, a paperwork issue forced Sarah back to LA for a day. She needed to sign the final asset division documents, the last thread tying her to her past. After meeting Rachel, feeling the city's weight, she decided to walk in a park, a green oasis amid the concrete, before driving back to Vermont. Watching families and kids play, she noticed a woman on a nearby bench, speaking to a phone propped on a makeshift tripod. The woman wore simple clothes, no makeup, her now shorter hair swaying in the breeze. It was Olivia. Sarah watched for a moment. Olivia was mid-live, speaking with a passion Sarah had never seen. And the cycle only breaks when you realize love shouldn't hurt. A narcissist convinces you you're the problem. Your pain is exaggerated. You're crazy. He isolates you so his voice is the only one you hear. Waking up from that is the hardest and most important thing you'll ever do. The words floated through the park, and Sarah felt a chill. This woman, who could have been her enemy, was now saving others from the fate that nearly destroyed them both. In that moment, the circle closed. Olivia, sensing eyes on her, looked up and met Sarah's gaze. Recognition was instant. No anger, no awkwardness, just a deep, silent understanding. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. Then, impulsively, she did something her new authenticity allowed. "Guys, you won't believe who's here," she said to the camera, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to invite someone to join this live. A woman who, without knowing it, saved me. The strongest woman I've ever met." She gestured toward Sarah. For a second, Sarah hesitated. Her life was private now. But seeing Olivia's face, reflecting the same strength she'd found, she knew what to do. She stood and walked to the bench. When Sarah appeared on screen, the internet froze. The two women side by side, not as wife and mistress but as allies, were emotional. Their thousands of viewers were too. The live didn't just go viral, it exploded. It became an event, a milestone. The image of them, united by pain and triumph, was infinitely more powerful than the scandal that had linked them a year earlier. In a silent, empty luxury condo, Peter Hamilton watched the same live on his tablet. He saw the two women he'd destroyed, now stronger and more whole than ever. He saw the admiration in the comments, the power they radiated together. He said nothing. He just turned off the device, his face an unreadable mask. The silence in his condo was no longer loneliness. It was the silence of irrelevance. He was no longer the hero, not even the villain. In their story, he was just the past. In his own, there was nothing left to write. And so the story of Sarah and Olivia, which began with a scandal meant to break them, became a powerful testament to strength and unity. They didn't just survive the man who tried to erase them. They thrived, each in her own way, using their scars as a map to guide others. But as they rose, a question lingers in the air, hanging over the silence of Peter's condo, where he watches it all unfold. What do you think he felt in that moment? Was it a flicker of genuine remorse for the pain he caused these women, or just the anger and humiliation of a man who lost control, seeing himself as the true victim? Do you believe someone like him can learn from his mistakes? Or is he just biding his time, waiting for the dust to settle, plotting his next move to find a new target and restart the cycle of destruction? Your thoughts matter. Share in the comments what you think goes on in the mind of someone like him. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, if you connected with Sarah and Olivia's strength, please give this video a like. It helps us share their message with more people. And most importantly, if you're not part of our community yet, subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't miss our next stories, and you'll help us keep creating content made with care for you. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.